to welcome everybody to this nice afternoon panel on SDG, Sustainable Development Goal number 12, which is about responsible consumption and production. And more specifically, in this panel, we are going to talk about the case for global consumption and production of alternative meats. So perhaps it's a good idea for me to start by introducing myself. My name is Carla Molento, and I am a veterinarian as a profession. And I've been always involved with academia and research, and my field of work is animal welfare. So I've been coordinating the Animal Welfare Laboratory at the Federal University of Paraná since I started working here as a professor in the year 2004. And we have a long experience of measuring welfare of farm animals and also trying to improve their lives, trying to understand the critical welfare issues and trying to find solutions. And I can tell you, this is very difficult to find solutions. And I'll have the opportunity to talk more about that during my talk in the afternoon. Now, I just would like to acknowledge Professors Farley Nobre efforts for this roundtable to exist in this very nice conference organized by UFPR International team. It was really Professor Farley's idea to discuss alternative proteins here and the SDG 12. So I thank him for all his efforts, and I'd like to let everybody know that it was because of his initiative that we are here. Unfortunately, he's not able to join us today, so I'll do my best to represent his efforts, and in doing so, I am very happy to count with the help of Professor Germano Glufke Reis, who is also here with us and is co-hosting this afternoon with me. So thank you, Germano, as well.
Pleasure, Carla. Thank you.
And I would like to take a very, very quick note of the major efforts of those who organized the overall conference, which is very big. There are many different rooms, as you know, and I think they've done a brilliant job. So thank you, all the organizers. I thank Marja, who is the person I was in closer contact to, but in her name, I would like to express my thanks to all the organizers. Okay, so the way our afternoon is organized is we'll have the privilege of a very, very, I think, privileged opportunity to listen to our keynote speaker. And then after that, we'll have a roundtable with 4 talks and room for questions and answers. So we'll begin our afternoon by this great opportunity to hear the talk prepared for us by Stephanie von Stein. So Stephanie, welcome. It is really a pleasure. We would like to thank you for accepting our invitation. It's very nice of you. And just before handing the floor to you, I would like to say a few words on Stephanie's work. So she oversees and provides strategic support for the Good Food Institute's international affiliate organizations across the globe as they work to advance the alternative proteins industry as a key solution for the climate crisis, antimicrobial resistance, and food insecurity. Stephanie also leads GFI's work with multilateral agencies and development finance institutions to connect those agencies with promising alternative protein value chain investments that align with their program priorities. Prior to GFI, Stephanie focused on building environmental civil society organizations in Asia. She is a multi-year grantee of the National Endowment for Democracy for her work creating a network of environmental advocacy groups across China. She has a broad-based knowledge of China's environmental protection law and current environmental policy directives. And she has collaborated with grassroots development and environmental advocacy groups throughout East and South Asia. So, Stephanie, we are delighted to have you with us. Thank you so much. And as a last thing, I would like to request your authorization to record your talk, if that's okay with you. And I remind all the audience that if anyone does not want their image to be recorded, please turn off your cameras. Stephanie, please be welcome to our afternoon.
Thank you so much, Carla. And yes, I agree to be recorded. So thank you for asking. And if you would bear with me for one moment, I'm going to share my, begin the process of sharing my screen. Okay. Okay. How does that look? Are you able to see it?
Yes, it looks beautiful.
All right, wonderful. Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. Humanity now poses a threat to the stability of the planet. This requires nothing less than a new global agricultural revolution. So, there's nothing like a dramatic slide and visual to wake everyone up after lunch. But in all seriousness, today I'll be talking about the future of the Earth and the problem of how we will feed nearly 10 billion people here in 2050. So Carla has already introduced me, so I don't need to say any more about myself, except that I would just mention that we work in 5 regions, which are Asia, the Asia Pacific region, India, Europe, Israel, and in Brazil. And let me introduce the Good Food Institute. So the Good Food Institute is a global nonprofit organization working to reimagine meat production. As a global nonprofit think tank, we work with scientists, policymakers, corporations, and innovators to advance the science, policy, and markets for alternative proteins globally. We deliver all of our services free of charge and publish open access science and market research to benefit a range of stakeholders across the industry. So why does GFI focus on reimagining meat production? Because the way meat is produced through industrial animal agriculture is the cause of numerous harms across a wide range of issues, from climate change to food insecurity to rising antimicrobial resistance to water and air pollution, labor abuses, and extreme animal suffering. According to the FAO, food systems are responsible for 1/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions, and animal protein production is responsible for more than half of that. Did you know that even if fossil fuel emissions were immediately halted, global protein production alone would make meeting the Paris Agreement's 1.5 degrees Celsius climate target impossible? Climate change is already wreaking havoc on our food system, increasing food insecurity globally. More frequent and severe storms, floods, heat waves, wildfires, and cyclones are reducing the amount of food that farmers can produce and driving up food costs. Today, 1 in 4 people in the world are either moderately or severely food insecure. And the world's population is predicted to increase to close to 10 billion by 2050. That's an additional 2 billion people in less than 30 years. So in the very near future, we will need to rapidly increase rather than decrease our global supply of food, including proteins. From this slide, you'll see that global meat demand just keeps going up and up. By 2050, the world's population is anticipated to increase by 30%, but demand for poultry, for instance, will increase 120%. According to the World Resources Institute, demand for meat overall is set to nearly double by 2050. An increased demand is not just driven by population growth, but to the emerging middle class in places like China, India, and Southeast Asia. As people grow wealthier, they naturally want to consume more meat. So meat consumption is rising and is a major cause of greenhouse gas emissions. But not only that, clearing land for livestock and to grow food for animals has destroyed habitats and caused 91% of the deforestation of the Amazon. Similar practices are causing biodiversity loss across the world. In addition to the destruction of terrestrial or land species, industrial animal agriculture is leading to biodiversity loss in freshwater habitats. Largely due to industrial animal agriculture, 80% of freshwater populations have been lost in the last 40 years, declining twice as fast as marine and land species. Industrial animal agriculture is the top source of eutrophication, polluting water systems and contributing to hundreds of thousands of miles of coastal dead zones. In fact, livestock and water and poultry from the largest farms in the US produce 370 million tons of manure per year. That's 13 times as much waste as the entire US population produces. In September 2018, Hurricane Florence dumped record-breaking rains, in North Carolina, 8 trillion gallons over 4 days, actually, and swelled the Cape Fear River. 33 hog waste lagoons overflowed, and the pink slurry mixed with floodwaters and contaminated waterways across the state. Climate change will make these events more frequent and severe. And not only is industrial animal agriculture a leading cause of water pollution, it also uses an enormous amount of water. Did you know that 29% of the average global consumer's water footprint is from meat and milk products? And if these destructive consequences of animal agriculture were not enough, another major threat stemming from industrial animal agriculture is antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Antibiotic-resistant bacteria are among the gravest health threats we face today. It's estimated that up to 162,000 people die per year in the United States as a result of antibiotic-resistant infections. That's more people than are killed in all kinds of accidents and more than double the deaths from opioid overdoses, which is a big problem in the United States, making it the third leading cause of death in the US, behind heart disease and cancer. Much of this is due to the massive amount of antibiotics fed to animals on farms as a preventative measure to keep them relatively healthy despite their awful and terribly cramped conditions. The UN has warned that if no action is taken, drug-resistant diseases could cause 10 million deaths each year by 2050 and damage the global economy as severely as what we saw in the 2008 global financial crisis. Finally, current production of animal products forces 56 billion thinking, feeling individual animals to lives of extreme confinement, emotional trauma, painful mutilations, and violent deaths every year. And that doesn't even count aquatic animals. So how will we feed the nearly 10 billion people on Earth by 2050 and do so sustainably, responsibly, safely, and securely? The alternative protein industry offers a sustainable and reliable solution. So what are alternative proteins? And what's so exciting about the alternative protein industry? I'll go into more detail shortly, but in brief, alternative proteins are proteins that are made directly from plants through fermentation technology or cultivated from animal cells. With these technologies, we can make meat, egg, dairy, and seafood that people love without destroying the planet. So instead of asking consumers to give up the foods they love, GFI is working to accelerate the alternative protein industry by helping companies make products that are delicious, affordable, and accessible. Digging into the sustainability data for plant-based meat, separate life cycle analyses conducted by Morningstar Farms, Impossible Foods, and Beyond Meat concluded that replacing conventional beef with plant-based beef can reduce land use by 96% and greenhouse gas emissions by 96%. By 86%. The numbers are similar across meat categories and even better for pork. And for cultivated meat, according to a rigorous life cycle analysis we commissioned with independent research firm CE Delft, replacing conventional meat with cultivated beef can reduce land use by 95% and greenhouse gas emissions by 92%. It's noteworthy that food systems emissions are finally being addressed at the multilateral level, as evidenced by the first ever UN Food Systems Summit that took place in New York in September, and where emissions from the global food system were addressed as a leading cause of climate change. And by the launch at COP26 of the Agricultural Innovation Mission for Climate Initiative, jointly led by the UAE and the United States, committing to significantly increase investment in climate smart agriculture and food systems innovation over the next 5 years. Already 30 additional countries have signed on to this initiative. Sustainability, public health, and food security are great reasons for food companies to take a serious look at alternative proteins. But there's another very important reason, and that's the exploding market opportunity. According to a recent Boston consulting group, Blue Horizon Corporation report, alternative meat, eggs, and dairy are expected to be a $290 billion industry by 2035, up from only $4.1 billion in 2020, and to comprise a minimum of 11% of the entire protein market, possibly as much as 22% of the market. And the financial services company Jefferies predicts that by 2040, the alternative protein industry could be as large as $470 billion. Let's do a quick overview of the three main alternative meat categories and take a look at some of the companies that are making these products. Starting with the plant-based category, plant-based meat, eggs, seafood, and dairy are produced directly from plants. Like animal products, they are comprised of protein, fat, vitamins, minerals, and water. Next generation plant-based options look, taste, and cook like conventional meat. And unlike conventional meat, they also offer complex carbohydrates and fiber, benefiting digestion and blood sugar regulation. But plant-based meat has been around for decades, right? Well, they have, but do any of you like any of these products? They have been a very poor imitation of the real thing. But innovation has brought plant-based meat to a whole new level. Here are a few examples of some of the leading plant-based meat, egg, and dairy 2.0 brands that you can find on your own grocery shelves. In Brazil, I'm guessing many of you have seen some of these products and hopefully tasted them. Many plant-based products to date have been ground or minced because that's an easier technology. But recently, 3D printing technology has emerged as a promising production method for making previously unimaginable products like 3D whole cuts of meat, like steaks and chops. The second category of alternative proteins that I will cover is fermentation. Fermentation has been used in food production for millennia, Ancient civilizations used microbial cultures to preserve foods, create alcoholic beverages, and improve the nutritional content of foods. Recently, fermentation has really emerged as a new driver of plant-based product innovation. The idea with fermentation is to program microorganisms, such as fungi, yeast, and bacteria, to express specific proteins or fats, treating the microorganisms like little cell factories. Sometimes the microorganisms and the protein they produce are used together as a fast-growing standalone source of protein, as in the meatless brand corn, made with mycoprotein. With a process called precision fermentation, microorganisms can be used to produce functional ingredients such as whey, casein, or egg proteins, which are then added to plant-based products to bring their taste and texture even closer to those of their animal counterparts. Finally, cultivated meat. Cultivated meat is genuine animal meat or seafood that can replicate the sensory and nutritional profile of conventionally produced meat because it's comprised of the same cell types arranged in the same three-dimensional structure as animal muscle tissue. Here's what making cultivated meat looks like at a basic level. A small sample of cells is obtained from an animal. Then those cells are expanded or proliferated in a bioreactor or cultivator. Once there are sufficient number of these undifferentiated starting cells, they are moved to a different bioprocessors where they grow into cells that make up meat, including muscle, fat, and connective tissue. Then they are combined into a final meat product. This process takes about 6 to 8 weeks. Far faster than the time required to raise an animal for slaughter. Here's the current cultivated meat product landscape. You can see the rapid expansion over the past 6 years. Since the first cultivated meat company started in 2015, the competitive landscape has grown with increasing speed, nearly doubling in number of startups every year. This graphic provides a non-exhaustive sampling of companies in the space. By the end of 2021, at least 76 total cultivated meat and seafood industry startups will have publicly announced themselves. And according to a new report by McKinsey, cultivated meat could be a $25 billion industry by 2030. Here are some photos of the world's first cultivated meat products. First was a burger made at a cost of $280,000 in 2013. The next was a meatball, and then cultivated fish. And then in 2019, the world's first cultivated shrimp dumpling. These were made by 4 different companies on 3 different continents. And here are some of the world's first cultivated meat tasting events. Last December, GFI Israel hosted an event where then Prime Minister Netanyahu tasted Aleph Farms cultivated meat, declaring it to be delicious and guilt-free. In the same month, the first commercial sale of cultivated meat took place at a restaurant called 1880 in Singapore. Now, the products are available to be ordered for home delivery or at the restaurant in Singapore. And then most recently, this past October, GFI Israel hosted another event, this time with Israeli President Yitzhak Herzog and First Lady, where they tasted Future Meat's cultivated chicken, also declaring it to be delicious. This incredible innovation in products has been driven by startups applying much more of a tech approach to research and development than we typically see with food companies. On the left, you can see that Beyond Meat is spending between 4 times and 40 times more of its revenues on research and development than traditional food and meat companies. On the right, we have the timeline of Impossible and Beyond product launches, which demonstrates an iterative approach with products being launched in rapid succession and being adjusted based on market feedback, much like software startups. Despite the high degree of activity, it's important to remember we are at the very beginning of a fundamental shift in the food industry. Just as vehicles replaced horses for transportation and electricity replaced whale oil for lighting, alternative proteins are replacing animals as meat, egg, dairy, and seafood producing biomachines and transforming the $1.7 trillion animal agriculture industry. This is a natural progression we've seen many times before. Over the past few years, we've seen strong consumer enthusiasm for plant-based products, even with premium pricing and early days product quality. This demonstrates pent-up demand for meat, egg, dairy, and seafood alternatives that are taste and price competitive with their animal counterparts. This demand is driving investment from global governments, private investors, and existing companies into R&D and scaling the supply chain for higher production output. The investment is resulting in improvements in taste and increased variety of products. And the scaled supply chain increases the quantity of products produced, lowering prices. This ongoing innovation will continue to cause demand for these products to increase, we predict. All around the world, governments are seeing the opportunity that alternative proteins will provide in terms of strengthening food security and in the face of pandemics and climate change, and are investing heavily in alternative proteins research and development and production everywhere along the value chain. To give just a few examples, I'll talk about Singapore, Qatar, Denmark, and the US, and then move on to Brazil. As part of its 30 by 30 commitment to providing 30% of its own nutritional needs by 2030, the Singapore government has been investing heavily in alternative proteins R&D and manufacturing. To name just one of its many investments in the field, last year, the Singapore Food Authority announced it will build a 50,000 square foot facility with a company called Live3 Biotech that's expected to produce 1,200 to 1,800 tons of plant-based protein annually. And in the Middle East, just this past summer, Qatar state-run agencies announced a partnership with cultivated meat company Eat Just to build a $200 million cultivated meat facility in Qatar, the first in the Middle East. And Qatar could follow Singapore and become the second country in the world to approve the sale of cultivated meat to consumers. In October, the Danish government announced over $146 million in funding to advance plant-based foods as part of an unprecedented climate agreement for food and agriculture. This funding is the largest investment in plant-based research and development by any EU country. And in the same month, the US Secretary of Agriculture announced a $10 million investment over 5 years for the US flagship National Institute for Cellular Agriculture at Tufts University to accelerate advancements in cultivated meat in the United States. And finally, in Brazil, Brazil is the most biodiverse country in the world, as I know you've heard in previous talks today and throughout the week. But this biodiversity is under threat from a number of causes, including climate change. And as I described earlier, from clearing forests to graze cattle and grow feed for the industrial animal industry. I'm happy to say that GFI Brazil is working in both the Amazon and Cerrado regions, hand in hand with federal and state governments, on a biomes project to fund exploratory research into the potential use of certain products, species of native plants for the plant-based protein industry. The goal is to identify native crops that are optimal sources of protein for plant-based meat products and to encourage local communities to produce these crops for the burgeoning alternative protein industry in Brazil and throughout the South American region. Once the most promising crops have been identified, GFI Brazil will work with local NGOs to encourage farmers to grow these crops and to help connect the farmers with the rapidly growing number of manufacturers of these products in Brazil and Latin America. So far, the Biomes Project is focusing on 7 native crops: the babaçu, the Brazil nut, capuaçu, guarana in the Amazon, and the baru, macaúba, and pequi in the Cerrado. I hope I said those things right. All of these plants are being prioritized because of their high protein content and favorable sensory characteristics. This project is expected not only to benefit farmer incomes and increase the availability of alternative protein products across Brazil and the region, but by giving farmers an alternative to burning trees to make room for animal grazing and soy production, it's expected to slow the destruction of the Amazon and Cerrado rainforests. To summarize, whether it's species loss from sewage and industrial animal farms, dead zones in water bodies, deforestation in the Amazon, or antimicrobial resistance from the overuse of antibiotics in the industrial animal industry, if we want to tackle climate change, biodiversity loss, and antimicrobial resistance, we have to tackle animal protein and factory farming. Alternative proteins can help us achieve Sustainable Development Goal 12, and as you have seen, an additional 7 SDGs. I thought I would end by giving you a snapshot of my amazing colleagues at GFI Brazil. You can tell how quickly the alternative protein sector has grown by how many team members are required to accommodate all the needs of the sector in Brazil alone. In 2017, we had only 1 team member in Brazil, and now 4 years later, we have 14. So if you're interested in learning more about alternative proteins and even dedicating your careers to the sector, I hope you'll get in touch with me or reach out to my amazing team members right here in Brazil. Here are our email addresses, and I will make this presentation available to you all if you want as a PDF. I've listed a few resources here at the very end that you might be interested in exploring further. So thank you very much. Very happy to answer any questions that that people might have.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. It was so enjoyable to listen to your talk. It would be anytime enjoyable, but I think that right after the plenary talk that was making us feel so sad and in a way cornered by this tipping point in the Amazon forest, which is perhaps symbolic of what we are doing to our planet. And we feel that the situation is so urgent and we don't know where to look for hope, because it's like we were in a train, fast speed, to an accident. So it's very, very nice to listen to you and to see how fast a potential significant contributor to solving our situation, how fast it is growing. So thank you so much for sharing all this knowledge and an overview of the world in terms of where we are. And of course, we hope we'll move very fast because, as I said, the situation is very urgent. And it was interesting to see you using the word race, because when we start following closer the developments for the alternative protein world, it feels like we are repeating the race for gold, you know, when people were in the 19th century racing to find gold in new territories recently discovered by the European cultures. People were racing for gold, and it feels just the same. We are racing because this is the gold of our era now. It's the hope for our planet, and it's also the hope for food security, as you've put very well. So now we do have some time, and Dr. Stephanie has agreed to be with us to answer some questions. So the floor now is open. I see one question in the chat, so I'll read that for you, Stephanie. I think it's not a direct question for the topic we are discussing, but our participant Marco felt motivated to ask you this. He says, despite the sensational initiatives to change animal meat for other protein sources, I think the better way of reducing our human footprint is to reduce the birth rate all over the world. Are there initiatives in this direction? If not, why? So feel free, Stephanie. We realize this is not exactly what you work with, but any thoughts on that?
I have to say that that is not my area of expertise. I agree that that would be, you know, make a big dent in emissions, but that is not what we focus on. I think our general approach is all of the above, right? So, you know, eating meat alternatives, lowering population growth, you know, renewable energy, all of the things that we can do are yes, we should do them.
Yes, yes, and perhaps the difficulties with reducing human population growth is that this is usually linked to educational levels, and this take a long while, and we do not have so much time. So we should, yes, look for all of these things together. I agree with you, Stephanie. I think Professor Germano has some comments and perhaps some questions. Please, Germano.
Oh, actually, my question is something that people frequently ask to us regarding food safety for cultivated meat products. People usually ask us whether it will be safe to eat cultivated meat. Can you tell us something about this?
Yes, so for sure. And you have met Elliot Schwartz, who is our lead scientist on cultivated meat in the US. And Elliot has put together a very comprehensive study of cultivated safety in the cultivated meat space. I believe it will be published sometime in the spring and put on our website. In the meantime, at a very high level, because I am not a scientist, I can say to you that generally we obviously know that we won't be using massive doses of antimicrobials in the production process. So that's going to lead to greater, you know, public health safety. And in terms of the safety of the product itself, it's shown that it can be, these products can be made safely. They're in food grade, they're made in food grade bioreactors, and there's a precise process whereby the cells are proliferated. And beyond that, I can't say more, but I can tell you that it is proven that it is safe and safer, actually, than eating conventionally produced meat. You're welcome.
Yeah, I think this is such an interesting and important aspect that you brought, Germano. And as you said, Stephanie, it's likely that it's going to be safer, and also it will present nutritional properties that are more customized, we could say, because these are meat products that we can really prepare from a recipe. We could have real animal meat, real animal muscle with without the bad fatty acids that bad for our health that are present in traditional meat products. So this is just one example of how we can customize and how we can prepare products that are completely careful in terms of people's needs in terms of nutrition. And the other thing that we could add to this discussion is the very important public health risks of the traditional systems. I think that's what you meant, Stephanie, when you said safer. Yeah. So cell-based meats and, of course, plant-based meats are safer in terms of public health because, as we know, as has been declared by the United Nations, it is likely that the next pandemic will emerge from the terrible scenarios of intensive industrial animal production. We'll discuss a little bit more about that during our roundtable. By the way, I would like to invite you, Stephanie, to stay with us if you can. It would be a pleasure and an honor to have you in our next talks. There is another very interesting question here in our chat for you, Stephanie. And the question is, what is your opinion about using alternative protein sources for preparing pet food?
Oh, you know, I listened to one of the founders of a vegan pet food company, and I'm not going to remember the statistic, but dogs in the United States consume more beef than the US population, as I understand it, as I recall. At any rate, these products that we make for animals are contributing to the same problems that I just discussed for, you know, throughout my talk. So, and we need to, and in terms of health, we're making these products healthy for our consumption. The products that are currently on the market for animals are not healthy. So if we can, you know, focus on making vegan products that are healthy for animals, all the better.
Yeah, definitely. And there are even hypotheses that some of the byproducts would be really, really good for the pet food industry. When we think, for instance, about precision fermentation, yes, or any processes where we have to purify and will only use part of the biomass that is produced, this biomass is very rich in nutrients, and it is perhaps also useful for preparing pet food and maybe even for other animals. And also the possibilities for feeding wild animals in captivity. You know, some animals have as their natural prey other animals that, of course, we are not going to be killing to feed these animals. But if we are using cell-based technology, we can feed the exact meat that species has evolved to eating in the wild. So this is a fascinating area of studies. Yeah. Well, there's a question here. Again, Marco, thank you so much for participating. So it's another question from Marco. He's asking, what about insects as alternative proteins?
We have a paper. We have a paper on our website about the use of insects. It is not. We do not recommend the use of insects for protein for a number of reasons, both in terms of efficiency and also in terms of suffering. So I can't speak to the details. But we are not in favor of using insects or as an alternative protein source. There are environmental arguments against using them, and I'm sorry I can't recall them, but you can find them on our website.
Yeah, for sure. On the part of animal protection, I can assure that the more we study animal sentience, the more we study the capacity that animals have to have feelings and emotions, the more species we include in this group. So we already have some insects that are considered very likely to be sentient, and the major example is the bee. Bees can do many things that are not really explainable without having a conscious mind. For instance, they can learn from observing other bees. So for a being to do that, there has to be memory, there has to be interpretation, and these are things that are only compatible to having a mind.
Yeah.
So anyone who has a mind must be protected, because anyone who has a mind is interested in not suffering, is interested in continuing to live their lives. So yes, I think I think it's kind of, Marco, postponing all the issues, but eventually insects will come to be questioned if we use them as we are using now vertebrates. There will probably come a time where the same type of questioning will
Carla,
also
let me add something. In
yes.
Looking at the consumer side, many studies have also shown that insects are one of the alternatives that would be more, how can I say, rejected by consumers, besides all the other arguments as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm really glad that we have a veterinarian and a marketing expert here on the call, because, you know, in speaking to the insect issue, you can go into much more depth than I can, but I can always direct you to our website for, you know, even further detail.
And, you know, just taking the opportunity that you've mentioned that, I recommend that everybody who is here and who is, of course, interested in alternative proteins, please do visit the GFI website. There's a lot of information, good quality information from many different places in the world. So we have time for one or two more questions. If I can, yeah, invite you. Okay, there is another question here. This question is coming from Maria Cecilia. Hi, Maria Cecilia. And the question is, how can we improve investments and other opportunities in the sector in order to accelerate its development in Brazil?
Great question. We are at GFI very focused on working with governments to encourage investment in research and development. We're working in the United States on that angle. We're also working in every region where we have an affiliate office. So if we could get governments, more governments than what you saw on the map that I showed, interested in this space race to produce alternative proteins, and for all the reasons that I described, that's going to move the industry forward, because governments do have the money to do it. And I'm also working with my colleagues around the world with the development finance institutions to see if there are projects that those banks are interested in the developing world to develop the industry, maybe from the ingredient side or the manufacturing side. Right now, we're exploring opportunities with the lab side of these banks, because they're looking at smaller initial investments, because right now the industry isn't mature enough to absorb massive you know, amounts of money. So the startups in, let's say, Thailand or in the Philippines, if we can find a good match with a development finance institution, then we can start moving those the industry forward around the world, and that includes in Brazil.
Yeah, this is really such an important topic. As we know, nothing can be done if there are no if there is no financial support, it's very, very difficult. And I do hope, Stephanie, that in this context, universities are also present, you know, because there is a role for universities, and it's been, I can tell from our own experience that it's been difficult to make universities speed increase in terms of developing not only research but also teaching for cellular animal science, which is of course going to be important if we are to develop a new industry. So this is really important, and I thank you for the answer, and I thank Maria Cecilia for the question. And there is one more question that I think we have the time to answer. And this question is coming from Leticia. Leticia is asking, well, she's saying, I would like to know more about the cost of cultivated meat to the population. Will it be accessible for people?
It's a great question, because as you saw, the first burger was something like $500,000 to produce. And we are not anywhere close to, you know, being able to make these products accessible to everyone. But it's predicted by 2030, we did a techno-economic analysis that by 2030, we think we can make a minced cultivated meat product for about $2.50 a pound. I think that's $5 and something a kilo, if you're in the metric system. So I don't know, you know, that doesn't seem quite accessible to everyone in 9 years, but give us about 15 years and I think we'll be there.
Yes, it's difficult to compete with some of the traditional meat products that became so cheap because we've just removed everything from the animals to make traditional meat so cheap. Like in Brazil, the price for chicken meat is so, for poultry, is so low. And it's difficult to compete, but I am very positive as well, Stephanie. I used to say to my to make a comparison to my students, remember that the first computer took a whole room, and it was almost impossible to think that we would all be around with these little things that everybody have today, or most people do, and this little thing can do so many computing tasks. So I think we can trust technology, we can trust science also in terms of reducing costs. So with this, I think it's about time we wrap up this first talk, and then we can have a very short interval, a short break before we start our roundtable. So I would like to once again thank you so much, Stephanie, for being with us. Congratulate you on your work and on the whole of GFI work. And I would like to leave the word with you for us to close this first talk.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure to speak with all of you. And I did want to put in a plug for, or an advertisement for, our university groups. So we have university groups all over the world. So we have a team member who heads that initiative, and she's in charge of finding groups in different universities that are interested in, that maybe they're studying biology, and pre-medical students who are interested in perhaps switching directions and moving into this space. And so these students get together and have contests and so forth. So I really encourage everyone to visit our website, and you can find all of this material there. And thank you very much.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yes, GFI is incredibly supportive of universities. Yeah, we can tell that by experience as well. So thank you so much. So we go for 3 minutes. Thank you, Stephanie. If you can come back and stay with us, it will be great. Let's take a 3-minute interval and we start our roundtable sharp at 4 p.m. or 16 o'clock. Okay. Hi, everybody. So I hope you all had time at least to stand up and make your blood circulate a bit with this very fast breaks we are getting used to doing with online teaching. So I welcome you all back. And now we start our roundtable, which I am pretty much looking forward to. We are going to have 4 short talks, and then the high point of the roundtable, which is our conversation. So to begin our roundtable, I would like to move right away for our first talk, which is entitled Cultured Meat Will Change Meat Production Chains. And this is a talk that will be given by Professor Germano Glufke Reis. We've all heard him already this afternoon, but now is a special time for me to say a bit more about Professor Germano. So he's professor at the Federal University of Paraná in the Business Administration School. He holds a PhD in Business Administration from the University of São Paulo, a master's degree from Fundação Getúlio Vargas, FGV, and a bachelor in psychology from the University of Brasilia. Germano was a postdoctoral researcher at the Institute of Social Studies, Erasmus University in the Netherlands. And he was also a visiting PhD scholar at the University of Cambridge's Judge Business School in the United Kingdom. He lectures in the undergrad and postgrad levels, MBA, continuing education, and in-company programs. Germano's current research interests are sustainable food global value chains and cultivated meat or cell-based meat value chain. Germano, before I pass the floor to you, I just remind you about the statement about the recording of your talk, okay? So thank you so much for sharing this afternoon with us.
Okay, Carla, thank you very much. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, you only have to move to presentation mode.
Where do I do that?
I get, you know, you have to present from the PowerPoint.
But it's already in the presentation mode. Perhaps I should start the presentation mode before sharing. Let me try.
Yeah, maybe.
Can you see my presentation anyway? In the other
yes,
mode?
We can see it, but not in the presentation mode. We can see it. It's
okay.
Now it's cutting part of your slide.
What about now? Stop sharing. Let me try again. I will start. Okay. Let me try once more, okay?
Yeah, it's okay if you want to present. If it doesn't work, you can present using.
Is it working now?
Beautiful now.
Good. Carla, I agree to be recorded, to have my presentation recorded. And thank you very much for the invitation, for this effort. I wish to thank also Professor Forte, who is not with us today. It's an excellent opportunity to share some ideas and concepts regarding cultivated meat. I love to start showing end products which are all produced through cultivated meat technology because they seem so delicious right after lunch, and you almost can feel the taste and the smell of them. They look like real meat, right? Because actually, as Stephanie just told us, it is meat. It's not expected to mimic big meat, but is instead actually true meat, animal meat. The only difference is that it was not produced through the raising and slaughtering of animals, and instead cells were cultivated in bioreactors. It's interesting to have in mind that those products can be for terrestrial animals, but for aquatic animals as well, like this cultivated fish fillet, which was produced by Avent, a startup in Hong Kong. Also, it's important to have in mind that cultured meat products will be in our shelves very, very soon. Before we expect they arrive, they will be with us. Last year, we witnessed the first approval for production and sales of cultivated meat products in Singapore. We expect to have more approvals the next year. Regarding Brazil, we had very interesting announcements from JBS and BRF showing that major Brazilian meat processor companies are entering this new industry. BRF decided to partner with the Israeli Aleph Farms startup, which produces cultivated meat in Israel, while JBS bought a Spanish company that produces cultivated meat a few weeks ago. showing to us that they are quite engaged. They are committed with bringing us cultivated meat very soon. Just thinking about some forecasting, if we look how the global meat market will behave in the coming years, it's expected that the overall market increases from 2025 to 2040, from $1.2 billion to, in 2040, $1.8 billion. It's a lot of money. But at the same time, there will be a diversity of products available in this market. In 2025, you see 90% of the products offered come from conventional meat production, and only 10% from plant-based, basically plant-based in this forecasting from A.T. Kearney. However, in 2040, it's expected that most of the meat of the market will be alternative proteins, in alternative protein forms, like 35% of cultured meat in this market and 25% of plant-based meat. Only 40% is expected to be conventional meat production. These are some logos. Stephanie have already introduced them to you, but I just want to add one more. MB Real Food is a company which is based in Brazil. It's a Brazilian startup that is developing cultivated meat. So the question I wish to answer this afternoon is, how can cultured meat change meat production chains? Just to give a very simple example of a conventional chain, since I know that many of the attendees of this presentation do not come from the meat industry, or perhaps are not specialists in animal science and veterinary. Therefore, just to have an overview on how such a chain works, it may have at least 3 stages: input suppliers, which involves hatchery, feed mills. The second stage are the farms, which raises animals, and then comes slaughter and processing, which produce end products that will reach supermarkets and fast food chains and all end consumers. If you remember the process, the cultivation process that was just presented by Stephanie, everything happens, starts with the extraction of cells from any type of animal, from chicken, cattle, pork, and fish. And then those cells are multiplied, differentiate, and maturate in bioreactors, scaffolds. For that, they depend of nurturing environment that involves a growth medium. And after that, all the tissue which is produced is processed in order to become and to develop end products, processed hamburgers, meatballs, nuggets, and more complex meat cuts. This is supposed to be the farm of the future. It looks like a brewery, right? This is because those bioreactors that you see in this picture are quite similar to the facilities you see in companies that work with any type of fermentation in their production processes. This is the case of breweries. If you take into account the process of cultivating meat, you quickly see that some areas will be affected, may be changed in the new chain. For instance, regarding input supplier, you won't need crops for feeding animals, right? On the other hand, farms wouldn't be necessary, and slaughter is not necessary as well. As you will see in the last presentation this afternoon, this brings some social challenges, but also several social opportunities. As an example, suppliers that produce crops for feeding animals can move to other opportunities, producing inputs for plant-based meats and for meat cultivation, for instance, supplying vegetable proteins that could be used for in growth medium for cultivating cells. It's interesting to think that the production chain involves several stages until the product is ready for consumption. The first stage, it's nice to have this in mind because each stage has its own opportunities, challenges, needs, supports in terms of investment, supports of from an entrepreneurial ecosystem and so forth. The first one involves suppliers of growth medium, bioreactors, scaffolds, 3D bioprinters, while the second stage involves the growth farm, the so-called growth farms themselves, which are those companies that are expected to cultivate cells in order to get meat. However, in order to get an end product, another step is required. Before I show you the next step, just a glimpse on where those startups are located, where those startups are spread worldwide, right? They are in several countries. You have them in Argentina, Australia, Belgium. Actually, these are the publicly known startups in the GFI database, because, however, we know that there are many more than this. But this is to illustrate that some entrepreneurial ecosystems have been very active in terms of creating new startups, like in Israel, Singapore, in the United States, in this example, where you see more intensive creation of startups and business. But it's changing all the time, and perhaps all over the world we will see many more startups appearing very soon. So I was telling you that in order to get that product ready to consumption, another step in the chain is required. This step involves partnerships between growth farm startups and other companies that are specialized in processing meat. This is kind of a sort of B2B relationship between companies that specialize in producing cultivated meat and companies like BRF, JBS, Tyson, Sierra probably could become one partner, but it's nice to observe that conventional meat processors are entering this industry and will probably be more intensively investing and engaging with cultivated meat, because they already have all the structure, distribution channels, all the capabilities which are required to produce and distribute and consume and products. It will be very, very difficult to growth farms to upgrade their activities and to include in their activities this further processing stage. Therefore, we expect that such partnerships will increase in numbers in the coming years. It's also interesting to know a little bit about how consumers have reacted to cultivated meat products. This is just an overview because there are many research outcomes available. If you need, we can later suggest you some reading, some articles about that. But just to have an idea, in the US, 66.4% intend at least to try, 48.9% will consume, while 55.2% will replace conventional meat for cultured meats. Italy, 70% intend to try, Germany, 57%. Regarding Brazil, we have 63.6% will consume, 76.5% will try. Therefore, we are very optimistic in terms of consumer acceptance as soon as cultivated meat products arrive in the supermarkets. JBS and BRF have both announced publicly, it's publicly known, their CEOs have announced that by 2024, products will be available, okay? Let's see what happens. We are just waiting, and we are optimistic and have our fingers crossed that this announcement becomes reality very soon. Usually people think more about terrestrial animals when they think about cultivated meat products. But there are many other opportunities. There are many other chains that could be dramatically changed and benefited with cultivated meat. One of them is the tuna chain. Tuna is consumed all over the world. The main problem of tuna is that it's a kind of wild capture. The fish is captured in the ocean, okay. It's not a kind of aquaculture. Actually, aquaculture also has several issues to be mentioned, but when you have fish that are captured in the ocean, there is no, Carla will explain this better, but it's not handled in order to reduce animal suffering, you know. The death of the fish is just terrible, right? And also, however, it's appreciated all over the world in several forms of product like canned tuna and sushi and sashimi and so forth. What is interesting is that tuna is fished in all the oceans because we have several species. Some of them are endangered species, and sometimes they are captured in the Mediterranean Ocean and then sold in Japan or in the Pacific to be sold in Europe or the US. It's captured all over the world and has to travel a lot. It's the processing of tuna usually starts in low-income countries where costs are much reduced. You know, labor costs and working conditions are very, very bad, but less costly. And then they are sent to more developed countries in many situations already semi-processed and frozen. There are some problems with capturing tuna. The porcine sometimes, actually, every time captures other species as well, accidentally, and captures also very small tuna, which impacts all the reproductory cycle. Wild capture has led to the decrease of tuna biomass worldwide and the decline in global catches in the last decades. Regulations and traceability have been not enough to overcome this issue. Illegal fishing persists. There are problems also with cage farming procedures, fish aggregating devices. Cage farming brings lots of suffering to tuna. And so how can how could cultivated meat contribute to mitigate those issues? This is the traditional, the conventional production chain of tuna. This could be the alternative production structure, having bioreactors, startups producing tuna meat inland, 100% inland, in a more localized process, which is better to adapting products to local needs, local habits, and also more adapted to local conditions in terms of distribution and sales. And furthermore, all those aspects regarding animal welfare and environmental issues could be solved or very, very reduced. Therefore, to finish my presentation, I would leave this question. Can cell-based seafood save the bluefin tuna, which is an endangered species? I hope so. I strongly believe. And I also think that other species could be benefited with cultivated meat, which is the case of the manatee, peixe boi. Peixe boi has been used for regional, for feeding people legally, because it's not allowed to catch and to use it for feeding people. We are trying to develop in a partnership with the GFI Brazil and the University of Amazonas, a business model that could probably solve this issue. And instead of capturing wildlife, could be used cultivated cells. Therefore, there are many opportunities to come and perhaps to develop a more responsible consumption in the meat sector in several chains. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you to all of you. It was great to be here this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Germano. It's always for me so nice to hear your talks and your optimistic look, you know. For instance, when you bring the tuna case, it is so nice to see that there may be other opportunities, you know, to let people eat tuna if they so much want to eat tuna, but preserving the fish and the oceans. So thank you so much. Professor Germano will stay with us the whole afternoon, and we'll follow with the next talks. But if you have questions, you're welcome to write them on the chat space. And in the end, we'll have a very nice open discussion session. And just a final comment, Germano, on the tuna case. It was, again, very sad to listen about the conditions of the Amazon forest that were presented by Professor Carlos Nobre in the plenary talk that opened the afternoon conference. But you know, these damages that we are doing to the terrestrial ecosystems, they are perhaps more obvious. We can all see a forest burning and it appeals to us. But usually when we talk about aquatic environment, we only see that nice water. So if we are not studying what's happening inside and the desertification that the overfishing is causing throughout the world in different oceans, perhaps it's not so obvious. Perhaps we still have that old idea that, oh, the oceans are so big, it's okay. But we know that we are overfishing and that we are causing huge areas of very low biodiversity in our oceans. Yeah, yes, you want to complement? Yeah.
Yes, and also something that is not obvious is regarding fish suffering during the capture process. You know, many times we are more used to think about terrestrial animals like cattle. We can already empathize with some sort of suffering, understand a little bit. But sometimes we think that fish are less equipped with complex nervous systems, and that's not right. Actually, they feel fear, stress, they are able to relate and several other stuff, and they have nothing in terms of animal welfare rules and practices going on during the wild capture process. This is something important to think about.
Yes, yes. So let's move forward. We're going to be talking about animals now, because now it's my turn. So I want myself to make this statement that I agree that my talk is recorded, and I'll share my screen. And Germano will be with us to answer the questions. I can see there are some questions in the chat for you, Germano, already. So just wait and we'll have all these questions answered. So now I'm trying to share my screen. Can anyone confirm whether my screen is shared? Do you see my screen?
Almost, it's not in presentation mode.
Yeah, okay.
What I did was to start the presentation mode before sharing the screen. Okay, it's okay now. It's okay now.
Okay, great.
It's ready.
So what I want to do now to start my talk is a quick exercise with you all in the audience. So if I could invite you and motivate you to play with us so that we can see what are our opinions here as a group. So I would invite you to go to www.menti.com, and when you do that, a slot will appear for you to insert a code, and then you type, please, this code 37258919. When you do that, this question will appear to you, and our first question is, can we know what animals want? Is it possible for us to know what an animal wants? Oh, that's a nice split. So our first 3 respondents have different opinions. So this means it's a rich issue for us to talk about because we have a variety of views. So I'll give a couple of seconds so that everybody has time to enter the Menti site and access the question. And I think we are about 15 people in this room. So please join us in this very fast exercise. I'll give 10 more seconds for people who wants to respond to be able to access. So go to www.menti.com and type the code 37258919. So can we know what animals want? Is it possible for us to know what animals want? I only have 5 responses. Please join us. So right now, the prevailing answer is maybe we can. And then we have yes, we can know what animals want. But we also have no, we cannot know what animals want. So 5 seconds, if any of you wants to join the exercise. It's going to be very fast, and we are going to be moving to our PowerPoint presentation in maybe 1 minute. Okay, so this is our overview of the opinions here in the group. And now the next question. So this is a broad question. Can we know what animals want? And most of us here think maybe. Next question is, let me see if I can move forward. Do we know whether animals want to continue living? Do we know whether animals want to remain alive if they want to avoid death? Can we know that? So this is one extreme example of what animals want. So can we know whether animals want, if they prefer remaining alive? So I should be able to get at least 6 answers, because we had 6 respondents in the previous question. So here, that doesn't seem to be the variation in responses that we got in the first question. So 10 more seconds, please, if you wish to participate, do so. So we seem to think here as a group that yes, we can know whether animals want to avoid death if they want to continue to live their lives. Okay, so thank you for those of you who have participated. Let's move now quickly. I'll try to our PowerPoint content. So let me try and share. Do you see my slides? Is it showing properly?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. So the title of my talk is Animal Welfare and Alternative Meats. And we do not have a very long time. So it's a short time frame for me to talk about the issue that is the most important topic for my professional life. So I'll try to be short. And this is a bit of the story of the animal welfare science. And it all started because of this question: can we know what animals want? And this was a major question in England in the 60s, especially because in 1964, this journalist, Ruth Harrison, published a book, which is called Animal Machines. And in this book, she described what surprised her as awful conditions for intensive animal production. She set out to do a journalistic work on farms, and she was surprised to see the way the animals were reared for the production of food and other items. And she's holding Vison, which is an animal that used to be farmed for skin, for their fur, for clothing, the clothing industry. So she started describing what she was seeing and putting pictures. And when this book is published, it is a major uproar in the England society. And people wanted to know, well, is this true? Are animals suffering, as this journalist is saying? Or no, this is just someone who doesn't really know how the farm animal production works. And scientists realized that they knew very little about how animals felt and what animals wanted. So because of this, animal welfare laboratories started to be organized, and the government was giving support, and the whole science started to develop. So today, animal welfare science is established science, and the major goal of this science is to answer what do animals want and how do they feel, what is their life quality in the situations where they are involved with. So this is a nice picture of the celebration of the 50 years of publication of the Animal Machines book. So this is, if you see my pointer, this is the cover of the original edition. And this is again her. This is Professor Mike Mendel from Bristol University giving a talk on the 50 years of the publication of Animal Machines. And the question, are animals still machines? Do we look at animals still like machines to produce food? And unfortunately, the answer is yes, they are still being used as machines. So as animal welfare science developed, techniques for answering the question on what animals want were developed. And there are many different ways of asking animals what they want. This is just one example. So you can ask a fish whether this individual prefers being alone or prefers being with another individual in company, just by giving this individual options and looking at what the individual chooses. So that's the way we ask animals what they want, and they will answer. We can rely on them to answer that. And not only we can ask animals what they want, but we can also ask animals how much they want something, just by creating scenarios where they have to work for what they want, and the amount of work they are willing to put into accessing some kind of resource is proportional to how much they want that resource. What is the importance of that resource for them? So this is an example of such a study. This is a dairy farm of the University of British Columbia. And the researchers are asking the cows how important it is for them to go outside. And this is a very applied question for farming systems, because very frequently animals are kept only inside. So the way they've asked that is by putting weight. So the opening of the door becomes, requires more and more effort. And what they found out is that going outside is so important for cows as it is having access to food, which is the control usually for this type of experiment. So the cows are willing to put a lot of effort to raise a lot of weight to go outside. And that means that from the point of view of the cow, not from our point of view, from the point of view of the cow, getting access to an outdoor area is a very, very important thing in their everyday life. Okay, so that's how the animal welfare scientists ask animals how much they want something. Okay, so this can be done in virtually any scenario with any animal species. We can ask them. We need to be willing to hear their answers, of course. So yes, animals can tell us what they want. Can we estimate how animals feel? Yes, we can also estimate how they feel. And this is done by a list of indicators that are organized in animal welfare assessment protocols. So we have assessment protocols for the main species that are used for the production of food. These are the first ones that were published in 2008, 2009. Today there are many more. So the first ones were published for the main food production species like cattle, poultry, and pigs. And we have many more assessment protocols today. Okay, so we can estimate how animals feel. Although it is very intuitive, I don't think anyone who really is trying a sincere look at a situation of an animal in this kind of confinement will have any doubts that this animal has many welfare problems, a list of welfare problems. Okay, so only using empathy, we already have many answers, but we also have technical ways of responding this type of questions objectively, because it is often required to make, you know, recommendations or even to help governments putting up laws, such as the laws in the directives in the European Union that ban the use of cages for some food production systems. So Europe has banned the use of this type of cages that I've just shown. Although in Brazil, this is the most typical pig production system that we can find. Anytime a person in Brazil goes to a supermarket and buys ham, this person is putting money into this type of industry, okay? And there are efforts to change this situation also in Brazil. This is an example of a group of scientists that met in 2017 in the city of Piracicaba, state of São Paulo. This group was trying to support the transition of the egg production farms to move from caged hens to cage-free systems. So that's the support for all this is coming from animal welfare science basic studies showing the problems that the animals see with their conditions. But we know, and this is a paper by Professor Germano and I, where we were able to study some facts related to corporate social responsibility standards and animal welfare. And in the end, as usually we end up concluding in this type of work, the truth is that there are very minor advancements in terms of animal welfare because the standards that are put are low standards, okay? So it's not very difficult for a farm to be certified for animal welfare. Sometimes the certification does not even change the lives of animals because the requirements for the certification are basically what the industry is already making. So in order to improve the lives of animals involved in food production for humans, we need more strict standards. And this is very difficult because this will interfere with the costs of production. And there is, of course, a very strong drive to maintain costs low so that the end product is low and the consumption is high. So how do alternative proteins relate to animals, especially animals involved in food production? We could see the situation, the current situation of the animals that are in these systems. I've just shown you some examples. What would be perhaps the future situation in terms of farm animal welfare should alternative proteins success in reaching the markets? Are there any benefits for wild animal welfare? And finally, what would happen with the way we interact with animals? So I'll move forward. We've seen the current situation and we've been studying future possibilities, and this is one of our understanding regarding future animal welfare. So there is an undeniable gain, which is the fact that the total number of individuals involved in the production chains will decrease because part of these chains will be supplied for by either plant-based meats or cell-based meats, okay? So the total number of individuals that would be projected to the year 2040 if there were no alternatives to traditional meat is decreased by the same year if we consider alternative meat. So this is a major gain. Less animals will be involved in systems that are low, characteristically low in welfare, okay? But what will be their welfare, we are not sure. It may be that the welfare will remain low if there is cost competition between the two products, or it may be that the welfare of the animals that remain in such systems will be higher if traditional meat becomes something like a gourmet type of product, okay? So it could be sold at higher prices. So we could have more investment in the animal welfare on farms. Okay, so it is to be seen. Let's see how this will all get organized. There seems to be additional benefits from the insertion of alternative proteins. It seems that much of our acceptance of animal suffering is linked to the continued demand that humans have for meat. This creates kind of a cognitive dissonance. It creates a paradox where we do not want to completely state that is, for instance, wrong to kill an animal when we kill animals to produce an item of food that is highly demanded. So this is something that is impairing animal protection to move forward. And there are many concrete examples of these impairments. Usually we can pass laws to protect cats and dogs, but we cannot pass laws to protect all vertebrate animals. Why? Because that would conflict with the interest of eating meat and other animal products, okay? So there will be benefits if we are able to uncouple meat from animal raising and slaughter. There will be extra benefits. And the other benefits we can see is that perhaps wild animals will benefit if we need less land per unit of meat produced, because wild animals are suffering due to our degradation of natural ecosystems, okay? So there are more benefits to animal welfare than the ones we immediately think, which are benefits for animals involved in the production chains. And finally, why are we talking about animal welfare in an event about sustainable development goals? Well, there are two major reasons I can think of. The first one is that since 2013, it has been formally published by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations that animal welfare is a component of sustainability. So we have to talk about animal welfare when we talk about sustainability, and that's the opinion that is stated by the Food and Agriculture Organization. And the second reason I believe these issues are connected, animal welfare and sustainability, is because we have seen how important it is that we find newer ways to produce food because of environmental damaging that occurs in our traditional meat and animal products chains, okay? And what we can see here, these are the responses from Brazilians in a study that tried to understand whether Brazilians would eat cell-based meat, so consumption intention in Brazil for cell-based meat. But one of the questions that was asked was, what are the perceived benefits of cell-based meat? And this was an open question. The respondent was free to choose whatever was in their minds as the main reason or the main benefit for cell-based meat. And look at what consumers in Brazil responded. So these were two big cities in the south region of Brazil. So for Curitiba, the city where UFPR is, animal welfare was the most commonly mentioned reason to switch to cell-based meat, or the most commonly perceived benefit of cell-based meat, okay? And then right after, environment. And in the city of Joinville, that's in the state of Santa Catarina, the most commonly mentioned reason was environmental aspects, environmental benefits. And the second most commonly mentioned was animal welfare. So not only cell-based meat will benefit animal welfare, but animal welfare can also help accelerating, motivating people to switch to cell-based meat and plant-based meat products. Okay, so this is why we were talking here about animal welfare, and this is also why we at the Animal Welfare Laboratory at UFPR are dedicating more and more time and effort to understand and to help speed up the transition to novel food production systems. And with that, I think I haven't taken more time than I should. And I want to stop sharing my screen. I hope I can easily do that. So have I succeeded in stop sharing my screen? Do you see my screen still, Germano? Is it okay?
I still see your screen, Carla.
Okay, so stop sharing. I'll try again. How about now?
It's nice now. It's good.
Okay, where are you? Okay, I'm back now.
You hear me?
And yeah, go ahead, Germano.
No, just it's working well, right?
Yes, it's going well.
Do you need any help?
Yes, it's always good to count on help, Germano. Thanks. Right now, I think I'm going to move forward to our next talk. because I can see there are questions in the chat. So let's move forward. We have 2 more talks. So the next talk will be on cellular animal science and university degrees in veterinary and animal sciences. And this talk will be given by Jennifer Biscarra Bellio. Jennifer is a doctor in veterinary medicine. She's a PhD student in veterinary sciences. She holds a master's from the PUC, Paraná. That's a university in Paraná. A very traditional veterinary course, where she has also graduated from the vet school, okay? Jennifer has a broad experience in planning veterinary education programs, and now she's dedicating her efforts to the understanding of the new requirements that novel animal food production systems will pose to relevant professions such as veterinary medicine and animal science, amongst others. So with that, Jennifer, I thank you very much for accepting the invitation, and I invite you to start your talk.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks. Thank you, Professor Carla. Thank you, Professor Germano, Reis. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'll share my screen.
Yes, you're sharing, but it's not presentation mode yet. Yeah, now it's perfect.
Okay. So as I said, it's a pleasure to be here with you today, talking about the university degrees in veterinary and animal sciences regarding cellular animal science. So, Yuval Noah Harari, in his book 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, said, if someone gives you a description of the world in the mid-21st century, and it sounds like science fiction, it's probably false. But if someone gives you a description of the world in the mid-21st century and it doesn't sound like science fiction, it's certainly false. We can't be sure about the specifics, but change itself is the only certainty. So, as we saw in Stephanie's talk, in Professor Germano and Professor Carla, the industry of food is changing. It is the largest and one of the most important industry in the world, and it's changing and fast. So I wonder, how about the education of the undergraduate veterinary and animal science students? Because I believe that they are professionals that can perhaps or probably will work in this market. So we started this PhD project, and it is nominated as cellular animal science, from the first concept to the production. So we have to think about some things here, and before making some questions, I will show you a little bit about the story of veterinary and animal science education. Veterinary science started at 1766 and became a scientific profession through the creation of the first school in France, in the city of Lyon. In Brazil, the first curriculum was announced in 20 October 1910. And the first curriculum in the first School of Agriculture and Veterinary Medicine in Rio de Janeiro, where today is the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, brought these subjects. In the first year, the students should learn about biochemistry, anatomy, histology, and embryology. In the second year, physiology, pathological anatomy, pharmacology, parasitology, parasitic diseases. The third year, microbiology, infectious diseases, pathology, medical clinic for large and small animals, surgical clinic, horse hoof diseases. And in the last year, obstetrics, examination of products of animal origin, veterinary legal medicine, and zootechnics, animal sciences. Till today, we know that all of these disciplines are offered in university, but we know that some things have been changing. The World Organization for Animal Health, in this guideline called Veterinary Education Core Curriculum, brings that some of these disciplines that I just told you may be part of the curriculum of all veterinary programs, such as biochemistry, genetics, animal welfare, microbiology, animal production, public health, and food safety. In Brazil, the National Curriculum Guidelines says that the veterinarian may develop actions and results in animal production, food production, animal health, public health, and environmental health. And that this professional must assimilate and apply the conceptual, legal, and technological changes that have taken place in the national and international context, considering aspects of innovation. Now I'll talk a little bit about animal sciences. This profession started in 1842 in France, and it's an applied science that studies and improves the means to promote the economic adaptation of the animal to the raising and breeding environment, and from the environment and from this environment to the animal. In 1953, the first curriculum of the graduation program was created here in Brazil, in Uruguaiana, in Rio Grande do Sul, in May 1963. The National Curriculum Guidelines for undergraduate in animal science says that this professional must work towards social progress and scientific and technological competences in service to the demands of society, and must try to go forward and attempt to the needs of individuals, social groups, and the community in relation to technological, socioeconomic, and organizational problems, as well as to rationally use the available resources, in addition to preserve the balance of the environment. So some of the disciplines that these guidelines describes are environmental sciences, agronomic sciences, economic and social sciences, genetics, breeding and reproduction, animal nutrition, animal production, industrialization. So, considering that cellular animal science as a discipline is not in the university degrees in veterinary and animal sciences, considering that laboratories and production lines are starting in Brazil, is coming close the day that this is going to be a reality inside the universities in the next years, considering the recognition that veterinarians and animal scientists are agents of this innovation, and this new technology will bring new opportunities for professionals who have a fundamental role in the production of conventional meat, is that we started this work. So, as I said before, it is nominated Cellular Animal Sciences from the classroom to the production. And by now, we are talking about veterinary and animal sciences, but of course, it's not only these programs, but these are the programs I am studying in this first year of my PhD study. Well, we are trying to establish the questions. Still, so do we need to develop new course programs in some disciplines that we already have in the curriculum, like cellular biology, animal welfare, animal production, just for instance? Or should we think about developing new disciplines in the program of this in these programs? For instance, beyond microbiology, but cellular microbiology, beyond genetics, but cellular genetics, beyond animal nutrition to cellular nutrition, and the inspection of animal products will need to be adapted to an inspection of cellular-based products to attempt this need for education. This is what we suppose till now. Do we have to work in new skills in this curriculums? As how can a veterinary or animal scientists perform in precision fermentation, in cellular-based meat, in plant-based meat? Can we adapt the formal curriculum to prepare these future professionals to work in all these markets, and how? So for now, in Latin America, we have the first discipline of a postgraduate program is the veterinary science postgraduate program in Federal University of Paraná. And this is the news that was sent to everyone to know when the first edition was being offered. Today we are at the third edition of this discipline, and some of the subjects of these disciplines are second domestication, new production systems, how does cellular animal sciences relate to the United States 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the cellular meat impacts from the laboratory to the consumer markets, transitioning meat value chain, internationalization of cell meat startups, cellular meat and global health, cellular meat and animal products technology and inspection, growing meat, the facilities and scale challenges, the facility and scale challenges of cultivating meat, cultured meat from bioreactor to steak, environmental impact of conventional meat and cell meat. So these are some of the subjects that this discipline brings to those who desires to learn about it a little bit more or much more. And in these classes, we are asked, or the professor asks for the students some opinions about a lot of things regarding cellular animal sciences. And I'll show you now the results of 3 different editions and how the same question was answered in these 3 different editions that this discipline called Introduction to Cellular Animal Science has asked. The question was, when cell-based meat reaches consumers with competitive price and taste, what percentage of the market will switch to it? In the first edition of this discipline, the majority of the students said that 41 to 60% of the consumers may switch to cell-based meat. In the second edition, the same question was made. The students started to believe that 61 to 80% may be the answer of the percentage of consumers that will switch to cell-based meat. In November, this month, in the third edition of this discipline, we had this answer for the same question. These students said in the majority that 61 to 80% would switch to cell-based meat. What can we see here is we can see here that as the time is passing by and more persons are engaging to this new market and learning about it, the opinions are changing. And this question will be questioned, will be, the students will be asked about it in another editions of this discipline, and then we'll see. So I heard before that this is a nobody's market, and I'd like to say that this is our market of all of us, and we should work together. And I really believe that it is necessary to prepare undergraduate students to work in this promising market, which demands a lot of technical scientific knowledge, because as we can see, as we saw at the other talks, it is coming. It is a new, it is a new market that will come up with the traditional meat, and we can act, perform, and work in all of them. So I'd like to thank Professor Carla Molento for the invitation, for the trust, and for being my advisor in this project and my inspiration. I'd like to thank all the cell-based meat team from LABEA. Rodrigo Silva, he is postdoctoral candidate, and he's working with social implications of cellular-based meat. Maria Cecilia Marques, she is a PhD student, and she is starting to work with transitions to alternative meat production systems. I'd like to thank Marina Susha Heidman. She's not at the LABEA now, but she was the one, she had written the first articles, papers about cell-based meat, and she, with Julia Valente, they did a wonderful job together with Professor Carla and Professor Germano. And I'd like to thank the undergraduate students, Georgia Paulini. She is studying education in cellular animal science for professionals from different areas. Ana Paula Grenzi, she's studying pet food with cell-based meat. And Leticia Sala, she is studying environmental impacts of alternative meat production systems. And my acknowledgements to LABEA and to all my colleagues, to CAPES, that is funding my scholarship, and GFI Brazil for all the partnership. This is my email, and I thank you all.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. That was such an interesting presentation. Thank you. And I would like to remember all those in the audience that we are going to be all answering questions soon. We have one talk left, and it's a very, very interesting topic. So by now, I would like to introduce you to Professor Rodrigo Moraes da Silva. He's finishing his postdoc fellowship at LABEA, the Animal Welfare Laboratory at UFPR, with a partnership with Global Action in the Interest of Animals, Gaia for short, which is an animal protection NGO in Belgium. And the title of the talk is Social Issues in Alternative Meat Production and Consumption. And just to introduce you to Rodrigo's background. So he's, as I said, a postdoctoral fellow working with social implications of alternative meats. And this work is supervised by myself and Professor Germano, who is here with us. Rodrigo holds a PhD in management from UFPR with an exchange program with the University of Exeter, United Kingdom. Rodrigo's main research interests include social impacts of innovations and new technological paradigms, sustainability, and cross-sector partnerships. Rodrigo has had an unexpected but very important professional demand for this afternoon. So we're very happy to count on Professor Germano's help in representing Rodrigo during this talk. So Germano, it is my pleasure to invite you again to make use of our room to give Rodrigo's talk. Thank you so much for helping, Germano, with this specific.
Thank you very much, Carla. It's my pleasure. I will try, because actually Rodrigo is an expert in his subject. I will try to do my best in this role. First of all, it's important to contextualize. This is a research that has been developed. This is a work in progress that we are developing together with Gaia, a Belgian NGO. And the main question, the main doubt that drives this effort is to understand what will be the impacts of all those changes that are likely to come in the meat chain with the introduction of alternative proteins and the cultivated meat technology specifically. Therefore, many studies have focused on consumers, environmental, animal welfare impacts, but less attention has been given to potential impacts regarding the social environment. This is a research. In this stage, we are analyzing what would happen in Brazil with the introduction of cultivated meat products. Okay. First, it's important to have in mind that any technological change has very important social implications. This is an example of another technology. We are representing here the automobile industry, the whole timeline, the history of the technology development. First, where every car was developed by a team, where the professionals were able to deal with several parts of the assembly line and were working mostly together, and many more people were involved in the production process. However, later came the Ford, the so-called Ford model, where a change in how the assembly line was organized, it was dramatically changed. For instance, workers had to specialize in one single activity in the line. Later, due to the automated production lines, you see much less people working in that production process. Of course, such changes bring both either challenges and opportunities, right? That should be addressed in taken into account, because some jobs were also new jobs, value-adding jobs were created, but several were lost at the same time. Therefore, to us, it was important to try to understand and to identify such challenges in order to stimulate actions, interventions, public policy in advance in order to improve, to help the development of the technology and mitigate social impacts related to its development and implementation. Especially for Brazil, which is relevant, where the meat industry is a relevant sector. 26.6% of Brazil's GDP came from agribusiness in 2020. Actually, we are one of the largest producers and consumers of meat. Therefore, we have lots of jobs involved in all the value-adding stages of the meat chain, from animal raising to slaughtering to meat further processing and distribution and so forth. Any change in this scenario may have numerous consequences for countries, both challenges and opportunities. Our research was conducted with several relevant, very important actors positioned in strategic roles. Therefore, they have a broad view, a broad understanding on the meat industry and the cultivated alternative meat industry. People from the government, meat and dairy industry, animal production, cultivated meat, food ingredients, plant-based industry, bioinnovation development, research institutes, NGOs, and others. All of them were interviewed in 35 in average sections. We organized the outcomes, the findings of this research in several areas, in 5 subjects. Very soon we will be able to share the complete report. It's still a work in progress. And the whole analysis with a comprehensive presentation of our findings will be available soon. First, a glimpse on experts' predictions. First, the alternative meat market is expected to be large. It was very difficult to say how much large is, what large means. But broadly speaking, in a very subjective perception, all our experts said that they see that many opportunities will come, and probably will be, Brazil will have an important role in this emerging industry. However, the decrease of conventional meat is expected to be low in the next few decades, because we already have all the facilities, structure investments, and very powerful and influential actors, and also due to consumption trends and several other factors, this sort of substitution will be not as fast as we first were expecting and hoping to be. The alternative meat market will be added to the conventional meat market in the coming years. It means that the industry is likely to build up a portfolio of products, including both conventional and meat and alternative meats at the same time, and also responding to pressures of consumers regarding more responsible products, right? We have seen now a new trend. This word was proposed by the GFI. We see now a group of consumers, the so-called climatarian. You have vegetarians, vegans, and also flexitarian, and now you have climatarian, who are all those consumers who are very, very concerned about the climate change, and therefore are choosing their products based on these concerns. Considering long-term predictions, the production of conventional meats may considerably decrease due to growth of alternative proteins. Now I will present a few, some highlights. I will pinpoint some key social opportunities, like producers of agricultural inputs will expand their productions. There will be many opportunities for people, for producers in the agribusiness, in order to produce new ingredients, inputs that will be used for growth mediums, scaffolds, sources of vegetable proteins, and so forth. Human capital will be stimulated in this new industry by the industry itself, and probably due to the emergence of new courses and to the understanding of professionals that they should address new career and competences development opportunities. Wage increases. Probably some areas will be highly demanded in this new industry, like in processing and distribution, product development, and also cellular animal scientists in several roles that were very well described in the presentation by Jennifer. improvement, this is very, very important. Improvements in working conditions in comparison to working conditions of the conventional meat chain, where you find several hazards and accidents, emotional suffering, and very bad conditions for working conditions should be dramatically improved in the alternative protein context. Higher degree of healthiness of alternative protein products, improvements in the lives of non-human animals. On the other hand, of course, several social challenges will also emerge and should be handled, should be understood, and should be addressed by several initiatives. Financial losses specifically for animal, especially for animal producers, mainly in the medium and long term. It's not clear at this point in time the amount, how large financial losses are, because since many experts told us that this change will be very low, and also there will be a portfolio of products, and also conventional meat products will still exist. It's not clear at this point of the technology development, the amount of financial losses that this means. Losses of job, again, in very specific stages, animal raising and slaughter process stages. Lack of, this is very important, lack of education among human resources may be a barrier to enter the new chain. This is why what Jennifer was sharing with us earlier is so important to us to understand and to invest more. High prices and low income may restrict the access of people to alt protein. Consumer resistance, in this consumer resistance is more like it's linked, it's more related to conventional meat consumption habits. Something that we have observed in our interviews and our findings, it relates to the level of engagement of institution, industry, research, and so forth, investments in Brazil, universities, several actors, depending on the level they engage with this process of bringing alternative protein to reality, the level of engagement may have important implications. I will pinpoint just a few of them. In the full report, we will have more further detail. A greater engagement would enhance the presence of opportunities, for instance, to intensively explore already existing capabilities that derive from the conventional meat sector, develop innovative alt-protein business models firms to become a major local and global supplier, Brazil becoming a global supplier of vegetable ingredients for the alt-protein industry worldwide. New job opportunities in several areas like product development, cell lines, meat production, a new type of role for animal scientists and veterinarians, less use of animals in meat protein production, among others. And as a conclusion, we have a few ideas and a few proposals. First of all, it's quite necessary, it's urgent to develop strategic plans and roadmaps at the national, local levels in order to put Brazil in the agenda, the alt-protein agenda and map in the world as soon as possible. As you have seen, this is a race, as Stephanie said. Very soon we have those products in several players worldwide. Which kind of role should Brazil take in this regard? Creation of innovation hubs and entrepreneurial ecosystems. There is an interesting initiative in Paraná, which is the Rede Paranaense de Proteínas Alternativas. Support for research development of human capital, public policies to support local farmers. We think that also investments should involve both public and private sectors. Broad education information campaigns, including private, public, and third sector initiatives to sensitize Brazilian consumers and other actors about the benefits and related opportunities of alternative meats. And finally, we see that all of that will depend in a large extent on the power of consumers and the civil society in general to press for more environmentally, socially, and animal welfare responsible products. This kind of pressure will certainly help to accelerate this level of engagement. So thank you very much. This research was developed, of course, for the three of us, but actually Rodrigo is the expert. Therefore, I try to do my best to show the key points of his presentation. Thank you very much. And Carla, thanks. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Germano. This is such great, brilliant help you gave us here, representing Rodrigo so well. Thank you. So now it's our time to interact and to perhaps create new ideas, new solutions, bring our perceptions. And I would like to invite you all, as we are a small group of 11 people, I would like to invite you all to open your cameras, if you feel comfortable, of course. And also...
Carla, just a moment, I forgot to say that I agree that the presentation is recorded, right?
Yes, thank you. I also did not...
This statement should be recorded as well, right?
Yeah, perfect. And we also have asked Rodrigo whether he would agree that these slides would be recorded, and he did agree. So we are all fine. Thanks, Germano, for remembering that. Yeah. So as we are a small group of people, I would like to invite you all, if you feel comfortable, to open your cameras and to ask your questions directly by opening your microphone. If you prefer, you can also type your questions on the chat. I will gladly read questions that are there in the chat. So to warm up our discussion, I'll start by reading a question that was already there in our chat. And the question is from Isadora. Hi, Isadora. Thank you for your question. And Isadora says, thanks for the presentation. Do you think that cellular meat will replace and be accepted by consumers of manatees, for example? I think that's for you, Germano. You've mentioned the manatees in your talk. And she goes on, or is there a cultural issue that motivates the feeding of, I think she means that motivates that people eat the animal species itself? So any thoughts on that, Germano?
Carla, could you please repeat the beginning of the start of the question?
Sure. Thanks for the presentation. Do you think that cellular meat will replace and be accepted by consumers of manatees, for example, or is there a cultural issue?
Actually, we are developing this business model a little bit different than that, not targeting at the first place the local consumers, regional consumers. The manatee meat is used to produce mishira, which is a regional meal, but it's totally illegal. Actually, our business model is to develop other kind of product based on meats from animals from the Amazon region, but to be sold elsewhere, for instance, in developed countries, where you have a cage, for instance, of manatee produced, and having royalties that will be sent to projects, conservation projects in the Amazon areas. Thus, we do not expect, because actually the market, of course, will show some sort of resistance. At the same time, we are not sure that it will be a huge market. Thus, we are analyzing the possibility of selling this kind of product from cells, no animal involved. The cells can be extracted for a very famous animal in the Amazon area. There is I don't remember the name of that manatee that everyone knows, and there's parties for his birthday and things like that. You for instance, could see the manatee and know that you are consuming products that come from his cells without hurting him, and knowing that as much as you consume manatees, the more we will have to its conservation, you know. Therefore, it's a kind of social, environmental, responsible business model, but we are still interviewing people in order to understand whether it could be actually successful and all the details that should be considered in such a business model and the threats and the opportunities related. But we think about focusing other markets, you know, but having royalties that will be used for conservation initiatives. And the idea is that this could be used in other types of wildlife, other species. In terms of technology, it's feasible. In terms of technology, it's feasible. It's not complicated because we don't have necessarily to produce exactly the same machine, which is far more complex in the Amazon area. We can do something different that is more adapted to the needs and interests in the market we would like to focus on.
This is very interesting, Germano, for many reasons. That the idea is to provide this meat to a different market. First, because I think in the beginning, and maybe for a long time, it will not be affordable for those people in the Amazonian region who are killing and eating manatee meat. It will not be affordable to buy cell-based manatee meat, especially when we think that this type of animal flesh eating has a virtual zero cost, because this is extractivism. They're killing the animals and they pay nothing for it. So this will require a huge cultural changes. That I agree with the topic of your question. But the other thing that I was thinking when I read your question is the idea of cultural changes. And we have many examples of cultural changes, and we know a lot about it by now. Like some people study the effects of neophobia. In other words, we are afraid of anything that is new, that is different. But as soon as people around us start doing or consuming or, you know, adopting whatever product we're talking about, this product becomes less and less new, less and less strange, and it tends to become more of a normal type of product with time. And there is someone who writes beautifully about this, and her name is Cora van der Wiel. She's a philosopher from the Netherlands, and she's published a paper entitled How Cell-Based Meat Becomes Normal as Traditional Meat Becomes Strange. And I love the title of this paper, because when we stop to specifically think about the way traditional meat is produced, it is really strange that in 2021, in talking about, you know, those of us who are able to go to a supermarket and buy food, I'm not talking anymore about regional people, regional communities, but I'm talking about big cities where we have access to big supermarkets with many options. It becomes really strange to think that we are opting to buy products that come from raising animals in awful conditions and killing animals. So I think that for this type of product to become strange, it's not so difficult. And I hope so, that people will think more and more about these kinds of issues. Okay, so we are open to more questions. We have time. If anyone wants to comment or to make a question, please do so. Meanwhile, I think we can talk about the overall message of all these talks. So it seems that we are moving towards a new way of producing animal products. And it also seems that depending on how much we engage with it, as Germano said, we'll have more opportunities, or we're going to be left with only the challenges. So, for instance, the future is not set. It will depend on what we decide. So if we decide in Brazil that, no, we don't want this change, we may end up facing only the challenges, right, Germano? Because the benefits will come for those who develop the industry. They will also, of course, bring job opportunities. They will bring the shares and all the economic development that comes from a new industry. So this seems to be key. And for us to have a solid industry, we need the professionals. And Jennifer has shown us some examples, but of course, other professions are crucial also, such as food engineers. We need food engineers to be in this industry. We need biotechnology engineers as well. If we think about all the inputs, right, Germano, we need people developing good bioreactors, because these are new kinds of bioreactors. The ones we already know will not do. Yeah.
Should be adapted. The bioreactors which are used for other types of fermentation-related industries like breweries, and we have suppliers in Brazil that supply breweries. It's just a matter of adapting and, of course, absorbing the new technology and the related competencies. Probably in the first moment, we will see global suppliers that will be entering, but there's a sort of adaptation that will be possible in the long term, in the mid to long term.
Yeah, just as a curiosity for you regarding this aspect of new equipment that must be developed to optimize this industry, there is a group of researchers that are leading seminars on cell-based meat in the United States, a group from the Purdue University. And I was, attending their seminars because I want to learn. And I was so surprised to see that people organizing these seminars are those professors from the mechanical engineering department. So they are interested in seeing how their professional skills will help producing the right sort of equipments that are needed for this new industry. And they were also interested in calculating energy exchanges, comparing traditional meat production systems with cell-based production systems. So it's a very multidisciplinary field. Yeah. So again, I invite you to make use of the chat or open your mic to say whatever you feel like saying, a comment or a question. We still have some time left.
I'd like to say that I agree. The recording.
Oh, yeah, great, Jennifer. Thanks. Yeah. So is anyone curious about anything that we've been talking about this afternoon? If not, I think we can move to ending this session. And in order to do so, I think I'll invite the speakers that are here with us for now. Stephanie von Stein said that she had to leave for a meeting. So I'll invite you, Jennifer, for your last comments.
I believe that this is an important moment that we are living here. And I believe that we are really searching for the questions yet, but a lot of answers are there for us too, so as well. So the clock is ticking, and I believe that we really need to think about engaging all these changes. And I'd like to thank you, everybody, again, and say that I'm glad to be part of this.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation to give a talk this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Professor Germano, your last comments?
First of all, thank you to you and Farley for the opportunity. I think that we have a nice opportunity with this innovation, with this technology, a very hands-on approach to bring alternatives that are more environmentally, animal welfare, and socially responsible. And in this regard, I also remember one of our colleagues, that is Hermes Sanctorum, who was working as a consultant for Gaia. This friend of us, Hermes Sanctorum, this is public, you know, he published this information in LinkedIn, the social media. Hermes Sanctorum shared the idea that he was a senator in the Belgian parliament for at least 15 years. And now he is the CEO of a company that produces alternative proteins, which is called Bellio, creating an ultimate meat and fish experience without hurting animals. This is because someone who has worked with setting rules, regulation, policy making, moving towards a more hands-on, practical approach, which involves a technology that has the potential to change everything. Therefore, this talk is a huge opportunity to be closer to it, to know more about it, and to think about real alternative that could bring several advantages in environmental and animal welfare aspects. Therefore, I'm very glad to be here today. Thank you very much. Thank you to the audience, although I cannot see most of you. Thank you very much. I'm sure you are interested, and we are here to help you and advise and to share anything you need and wish.
Wonderful, Germano. Thank you.
The word is yours.
Thank you once again. And yes, it was nice for you to talk a little bit of Irma's work. It's such an important person in all these developments, especially by supporting our work with Rodrigo. And I just would like to use this last minute of our meeting here to thank many people. So thank you all that are here with us until this time of the afternoon. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your interest. Thanks to all our speakers, Germano, Jennifer, Stephanie, and also Rodrigo, who is not here with us, but has given a lot of time to prepare and to take care of our afternoon here. So I thank him as well. And I thank all the organizers, and I think we should all be proud of this UFPR International Conference on such an important topic as the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations. And last but not least, as people used to say, I would like to thank Professor Farley, because it was, again, his initiative that alternative proteins should be one of the topics in this important UFPR conference. So a word of acknowledgement for his efforts and his perspective on this that led us to share this very nice afternoon. So thank you all, and I think we can consider our afternoon a huge success, because we've explored so many different aspects, and we can be perhaps a little bit more optimistic now than when we left Professor Carlos Nobre approach in showing us how desperate the situation is in terms of the environmental impacts of human activities. So thank you all, and I hope to see you soon in new opportunities. Thank you. Bye-bye.